All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our 6th webinar of the Support Squad webinar series. This one is called Cancer's Impact on the Family and How to Cope. And I'm really excited that we have 3 wonderful guests tonight that can all speak from a different perspective on their experience with how cancer impacted the family relationships and experience for them. And I know every single one of them has some strategies for how we can move forward with some ideas to make the experience better for those that are still going through it or are still reeling from the experience. My name is Abby Westerman. I am the co-founder and CEO of Be Present Foundation. And the organization was inspired in memory of my daughter, Kirsten, who was diagnosed at 19 and passed away after a 7-month treatment experience and her experience with the support network. And it's all about making that experience better by providing their friends resources and tools to understand the importance of being present and the impact that it has so that they can stay connected and be supportive throughout the experience. These webinars are just one of the many resources that we provide for the AYA cancer community so that they're more aware and better prepared. And this is just a really great way to understand the perspective of those that have been through it and really kind of breed empathy within the community so that they're better prepared to be supportive. The session is being recorded and it will be available later this week. We will send out an email for everybody that's registered so you are able to replay and review in your spare time or share with others. And we are just so appreciative of your time to share with us tonight. So thanks very much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, always feel free to enter them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will carve out some time at the end to be able to address those. So the topic again tonight is about cancer's impact on the family. And so we're really trying to tackle 3 important topics. And it's all because cancer disrupts everything in our life and nothing ever feels like it'll be the same again. And it can really create tension and uncertainty and stress in the family in particular. And everybody's impacted differently. But everybody's experience and the routines they have, the roles they have in the family, the relationships they have with each other, all will change. And that's just the reality. But there are some things that we can do to help mitigate some of the negative impacts that cancer has on those relationships. It takes enough from us. Don't let it take our relationships and our family, right? So really what tonight is all about is to talk about that experience, both just from at the very high level, the family experience, and then the experience amongst the siblings, and then provide some strategies at the end for how we can cope. So all of our webinars, we really tackle 3 different topics. Like I said, the one is to help everybody understand how to clearly communicate. Communication is the core of everything that's good in this world and everything that goes wrong in this world if we don't do it right. So we always talk about that as part of our conversation, and then just how we can all work together because it's not just one of us that has to carry this weight. It's about everybody working together and lifting each other up when they need it most. So the key is to be present, not to be perfect, because being perfect is what holds us back or makes us more stressed than we need to be. So before we begin, I wanted to give each of our wonderful panelists a chance to just introduce themselves briefly. So I'm just going to go around the little loop that I have in front of me. So first of all, we have Juliana Corral. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself, Juliana.
Hi everyone, my name is Juliana. I'm a AYA cancer survivor and a social worker. I am really excited to be here to share how cancer has impacted my family and to share the perspective of a AYA cancer survivor and someone part of the psychosocial team.
Awesome, thank you, Juliana. Alessandra, I will let you go next.
Hi everyone, my name is Alessandra. I'm Julie's twin sister. I'm really grateful to be here tonight and really give the siblings perspective on a cancer diagnosis since we often don't get a platform. Just a little about me, I'm working towards becoming a clinical laboratory scientist, and I'm actually an employee at the same pediatric hospital where my sister received treatment during her diagnosis. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm glad to have you here. Judy.
Hi, I'm Judy Wagner. I'm a parent of an AYA cancer survivor. And ironically, my son Jackson, who was diagnosed when he was 16, was around the same time as Juliana. And I think they have the same time frame. Now, what's crazy, because of what he went through, I'm now working at Rady Children's Hospital as well as a parent liaison. I get the honor to walk with the families through their child's diagnosis and help them from the beginning to the end and everything in between. So yeah, if you had told me I'd be working in a hospital before Jackson got diagnosed, I'd said you were crazy, but here I am and I love it. So thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to show how small the world is too, when Kirsten was actually being treated at Rady Children's for the last part of her treatment, I believe, Judy, you were one of the night cart or whatever
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I started out as a volunteer because I needed to stay connected to all the nurses that saved Jackson's life, and I used to do a bedtime cart. And
Bedtime cart, that was it. And
yeah,
that was a
came around
welcome,
with my little cart.
yeah, bringing all kinds of comfort to
Right.
everybody who's holed up in their room,
Yeah.
just trying to get some peace and quiet with the beeping
Yeah.
machines and everything else going on. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started in the conversation, because this is the most important part and the part that I enjoy the most, and that's just hearing everybody's perspective, because I think we all learn a lot when we hear what other people are going through, and it kind of helps us be more empathetic towards each other in the process. So the first about 10 minutes, what I'd like to do is just talk about the cancer diagnosis and the impact on the family. And that's everything from the roles that we used to have and now have as part of, the diagnosis and what it's created in the family, the relationships and how they change, and the routines. I mean, that's something that's also super important. There's no structure left in your family experience while cancer is going on, because everything sort of shifts energy and focus to and rightfully so, to the patient. But anyway, so what I wanted to do for this first about 10 minutes is just to kind of get everybody to share a little bit about the impact that cancer had on you, both in terms of kind of where you were and where you were after the diagnosis, which is your life experience, but then also, how the relationships changed with your family and maybe some of the experiences you had. So Juliana, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off.
Okay, thank you. So at the time of my diagnosis, I was 16. I was the end of my junior year in high school. I just got my permit. I was excited to go on the road, be free from my parents, gain a lot of independence. And, that age, teen and young adult age, is when you're starting to gain a lot of independence. And then once I was diagnosed with cancer, I immediately lost all independence. I love my mother. I love my family dearly, but they were with me 24/7 when I took a shower, when I used the restroom. They had to feed me. They had to change me. I was a baby again. So to go from being a teenager who was starting to get all this independence to being back to treated like a baby was a really hard adjustment. And I also was really craving that time with people who are my age and my friends and being at school. And I lost a lot of time with those people and kind of took it out on my family because I was with them all the time. So it did strain some of my relationships and my family, because in my experience, people came out of like the woodworks, like for when I got diagnosed, like people I had never talked to, friends, families, members that I had never spoken of, were coming and visiting me, which I was happy to have the support. But what we see in like AYA research also, like you can have all this support, but if it's not the people that you want, you still feel very isolated. So I felt isolated because I didn't have support from my peers and people who were my age, but I had my family with me, and felt like I was babied a lot. So, to this day, I'm really happy that I have a lot of independence, but to this day, I still feel like I'm babies sometimes, like, oh, you should go to the doctor, you might be sick again. What happens if you get sick again? So my experience was I was kind of smothered by everybody in my family. And an example of how I crave like other people's attention, I used to press the nurse's button just to get the nurses to come talk to me, because I liked talking to somebody other than my parents and my sister and my family. Because sometimes also you don't want to express your actual feelings to your mom. Like, I didn't want to tell my mom, like, just let me die. Like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired. I would never express that to her. So I felt smothered by my family, but craved attention and friendships and relationships with people outside of my immediate family.
Yeah, and I think when you're not able to express your feelings, that can also be a very isolating experience too, because you have to be able to express those, or you're just not living who you are in the moment, right? So yeah, it's all. Thank you so much for that perspective. I really appreciate it. Okay, Alessandra, let's hear the other side of the family experience.
Yeah, so well, Julie and I are twins, so it was never all the spotlight on one person. It was the both of us. We did everything together. We, were celebrated together, etc. And in Julie's diagnosis, that completely changed. Where Julie feels that she was smothered, I feel the opposite. I feel like I was kind of pushed to be extra independent. We were going through this life change where we're getting ready, senior year is getting ready to go to college. Julie talked about getting her permit and getting excited to drive. And I ended up being the one driving, but mostly to and from the hospital to the doctor's appointments, kind of being her transportation, as opposed to like me driving to a friend's place, etc. There was just a lot of responsibility that I had to take on that wasn't talked about. Like, I had to do all the chores. I had to be the one that passed by Julie's classroom to pick up her homework. There was just a lot of unspoken change that I just kind of had to adapt to. And no one really talks about how, yeah, you'll be doing having a lot more responsibility than before. I felt I also took a lot of responsibility in understanding Julie's cancer, her medications, knowing what symptoms are normal, knowing what's different, and feeling like I kind of had to grow up really fast. One of the things I remember is, filling out college applications, but not just filling out mine, but filling out Julie's also, and learning how to do a FAFSA application and not having my parents there to show me either, or learning with them, because, my mom was in the hospital with my sister and my dad was, working or something. So there was a lot of growth I had to do by myself. And, no one I never felt at a place where I could say, hey, mom and dad, like, I'm tired. I don't, I need a break, or this is too much responsibility, because, they were working very hard to help my sister, and I just kind of assimilated and did that too. So yeah, I think pretty much that would describe how things changed for us.
Yeah, and I think the inability to verbalize, going back to the communication again, not being able to verbalize any of that must have just felt really isolating from that side too, right? You don't feel like you can say what you want to say, because you feel like there's something that's heavier in the room that outweighs your heaviness, and but that's not the it's not the case at all, but you feel that way, of course, right? And it's just it's really hard to find that balance. And if nobody's saying, hey, talk to me if you're having issues, or let me know if there this is too much, if nobody's saying any of that, then you're feeling like you got to hold it all in. So thank you so much for sharing that, Alessandra. Okay, Judy, from the parents' perspective.
Oh gosh, it was great to hear both Julie and Alessandra's perspective, because it was like, okay, this sounds so similar. So identical. There's a definite relativity there. Jackson, well, I have two kids. Jackson was 16 when he was diagnosed, just starting his junior year, just 1 month into it. And of course, all I can think about is this is the most important year for college. Like, oh, you just got to get good grades. That was my big thing. I just, both my husband and I were like, that's just in junior year. And Hannah was 12 and she was starting 7th grade. And what's crazy is, just a little side note, the week before Jackson got diagnosed, she came home and told me about this girl that had been at Rady that was 12 years old and died of cancer. So we had this hour-long conversation about young children getting cancer, because I had never experienced that or heard of it. So we had a conversation. You just kind of, it was an opportunity for me to teach, talk about, gosh, when that happens, and talking to Hannah, because we were very open and talked a lot. And then the week later, her brother gets diagnosed with cancer and was really sick. He was not so great in the beginning. He was admitted for 6 weeks initially. So he was in the hospital for 6 weeks. And of course, like Juliana was saying, she all of a sudden she's a baby. In hearing that from her, I had never thought this before, but it was almost like Jackson was now a baby. I had to take care of him. And not that I consciously thought that he was a baby, but I had to be at his side 24/7. This is what I needed to do as a mom. And and I was so torn being there with him and not being with Hannah. And, because she was suffering too, but I knew where I needed to be, and that was in the hospital. And then it was my husband and Hannah at home doing their day-to-day stuff, going to school, working, and Jackson and I in the hospital. And they would come and visit. Luckily, COVID didn't exist at the time. But I remember feeling so not able to be there for both my kids, and that tore at my heart like you can't believe. And I mean, there's so much more from a mother's perspective. Just all I wanted to know is just tell me he's going to be okay. But I can so relate to both what Juliana said and Alessandra said about, Hannah I did everything I could to, have people help me with her, and, they come pick her up and go do stuff with her. And I had her sign up for tennis and things, so life could be somewhat normal, but it wasn't normal. And she was feeling the collateral damage of the bomb that went off in the house. And my husband too. I mean, just that, everybody suffered in their own way. And
Yeah, and there's no routines left for you. Like you say, you're trying to kind of create these situations that feel somewhat normal, but it's anything but that. Yeah. Interestingly, so I think I forget who I shared this story with, but so I'm one of 7 kids, and I actually had a brother who was diagnosed when he was 16 years old, so way back in the day. And so the age difference, he was the oldest and I was second youngest, and so I remember my parents not being home very much, but I don't remember much more than that. I have like these little tiny memories of it, but I can only imagine the weight that was suddenly put on my sister, who was the next youngest after my brother, because here my brother had colon cancer. He was very, very sick, but there were 6 other kids still in the house that needed to be cared for, so that's really difficult. So from that experience, I do remember when Kirsten was diagnosed, and my son was actually in college at the time. I think he was in his senior year. But I deliberately took him aside and made sure that I talked to him, and I said that, all of the focus is going to be on Kirsten, but I want you to know that if you ever are concerned about anything or whatever, please come talk to us. But the only reason I thought to do that was because of the experience that I had had with my, in my own home as a child, and remembering how hard it was for my sister, I think, being now the surrogate mother for 5 other annoying kids that were in the house running around at various ages. So yeah, it's definitely crazy, and it's never, the communication is never what it should be. So we're going to segue into the next topic we'll talk just a little bit about, and that's really more specific to the sibling interaction and relationship specifically, because as you mentioned, Alessandra, there is this sense of, there was balance before. You were twins, everything was kind of the same, and now all of a sudden there's this shift, and all the good treatment or whatever you want to call it sort of goes one way, and then all of the expectations and weight goes the other way. And so it takes a toll. It takes a toll on your mental health. You sacrifice family and friendships and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to start with you and let you kind of talk about some of the things that, from a sibling perspective, just that relationship that you struggled with or that changed for you.
Yeah, well, I think a thing to bring up first is I often feel like siblings are never talked about, or my perspective was never asked about. It's always, how's your sister? How's Julie doing? How is Julie doing with her diagnosis, et cetera, et cetera. And it was like, hey, hi, I'm the twin sister. I still exist. So, I mean, Julie was the center of attention, like Julie said, people came from everywhere to visit her. And it was just like, yeah, we're here for you, Julie. We love you, Team Julie, etc. And there was almost like a, hi, I'm still here, So it kind of built a little bit of resentment or bitterness because, Julie got, this cross country team from another school ended up getting Julie an iPad, and, I got like a gift receipt to go get a massage. So it was like, as a teenager, you're like, I want an iPad, so I was not used to that different in treatment. So it's kind of like being a little jealous of my sister. And obviously, like, oh, great, I'm being jealous of a cancer patient. Like, and then there's that guilt with that. And then, kind of having to take on this role of being responsible for Julie and, all of our tasks together. I like to share this story that I think about. We were at home and I had just finished helping Julie with every single task. And I finally had a moment of peace where I could just, be in my room and, I don't know, be on my phone or watch TV, whatever I was doing back then. And, I hear Julie calling me from downstairs. And I go downstairs and she asks me to pass her the TV remote. And the TV remote was within like a foot next to her on the couch. And I just remember getting so upset and so bothered by it. But I have to keep in mind that Julie at the time was 70 pounds. She was completely like almost emaciated. And so some little task like that requires so much strength and effort for her to do. So I'd obviously feel very guilty in having to feel upset doing those roles. So there was a little bit of bitterness. But, there was also a lot of opportunities for us to have a strong relationship. I think my role, even though, our dynamic changed, one thing that stayed the same was that we were sisters. And what do teenagers do? They pick on each other. And kind of picking on each other was our sense of normalcy. From an outsider's perspective, I probably was just brutal and mean to my sister. When she was bald and I said that she was sporting that Howie Mandel look really well, it was like a tease that could make her feel better. We'd laugh it off. And just there were a lot of moments that we did bond. There were a lot of moments where we could also find joy in just being with each other. But I did feel, though, that I had to be strong all the time around her. And I had to be cautious of what I said. I couldn't vent to her like, yeah, you having cancer is like a really big deal, because I'm not sitting there getting all the chemotherapy she is, I'm just there, I have it easy in a sense. So I was invalidating my own feelings about it, or, putting this front to be strong for her, which is a lot of pressure on a teenager to do. but, we're sisters, and I would have helped her, and I know she would have helped me if the roles were reversed. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's I appreciate that. A lot of that's hard to, some of that stuff is hard to admit, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to allow those feelings to be validated, and when you can't do that, it's just it gets channeled in some other way, right? And builds up over time. So Juliana, on the flip side, what are some other things that you felt or thought about, or that you feel changed or got better with this whole experience?
Yeah, thanks, Ellie, for sharing. I think she did a good job of kind of talking about our dynamic. But yeah, we were always treated kind of equally. Well, Ollie might say differently with our parents, but they try to treat us equally most of the time. And then she started not being treated equally. Like, I could get away with a lot more because I was sick. Like, if I was cranky or rude or cussed or said no, it was acceptable. Oh, she's, going through treatment. So not that I took advantage of that, but it was just easier for me to say whatever I wanted or get whatever I wanted. So that impacted Ollie and my relationship, because there was kind of tension between that. And I also didn't do a very good job of validating my sister's feelings. When she did express, I know she said that, she tried not to like vent to me, but if she did, I should have, a thought about how this is impacting her. But, even though there was a lot of tension and we maybe argued a lot more during that time, we did get closer because she, would come after school to spend time with me. And I felt like my sister was the only person who treated me normal. She did not really baby me, even though everybody else babied me. The doctor told me that I needed to stop using my crutches and I needed to start walking. So my sister would just take away my crutches, like in the middle of school. And people were like, oh my gosh, how are you taking crutches away from this person that has cancer? But she was like, doing things to make me stronger and better. And I appreciated that there was some sense of normalcy, especially when a diagnosis kind of changes everything in your life. She didn't change how she treated me. I mean, maybe it was a little slightly nicer. She, as she said, we still joked it. She still picked on me. But, I could tell that she was a little jealous of like my treatment. Like I got an iPad, I got an iPhone. I think I showed up to my classes maybe like once a month and passed them. She still had to like actually do homework. So there was tension, but we worked it out.
Yeah. That's awesome. But you're right. I mean, it is interesting, normalcy doesn't mean, perfection. It means being treated the way you're used to being treated, and not, having people change just because this new thing called cancer is in your life. And so it's kind of funny. I never really thought about it that way, but yeah, I mean, sometimes all of the joking and jabs and stuff is the coping part that you really kind of helps you get through it. And humor is always, I don't know if you guys always joke around, but I know I remember Kirsten, humor was so important to her, and if she didn't have that, I think the day would have been completely different for her. That was something she used on the doctors and, everybody else in the room. So
yeah, everybody kind of tiptoes around you and doesn't really know how to talk to you, because what are they going to be like? How are you doing? Like, well, I don't know. I may possibly die. Like, how do you think I'm doing? But my sister, talked to me about what things were going on in the world, our music, what's happening at school. She just tried to treat me the same as before.
Just out of curiosity for the two of you, I'm trying to think 2012, the social media, I think we talked about there, it was just kind of getting started,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Instagram had just started. Facebook was a thing for people my age. So it was like a good thing because it could possibly connect me with others. But then it was like bad because I was in the hospital looking at everything everybody else was doing that I was missing. I wasn't allowed to or I wasn't able to, not be tuned into what everybody else was doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and how about you, Alessandra? So you kind of probably also had the same experience, right? You were also, because you were kind of helping out with things, watching a bit of life pass by too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember getting asked for homecoming, and I said no. And deep down, I totally would have wanted to go to homecoming, but I just felt it would be so like guilty, or it would be really, it sucked to go to homecoming while my sister was getting chemo.
Yeah.
And I knew the day I was like, oh, that's when Julia's gonna have this round of chemo. Like that would really suck for me to go out, having a good time, being a teenager, being normal, and my sister's stuck in the hospital. So like, and I laugh about the social media thing, or I brought up how she got the iPad. I think the thing that stung the most was that Julie was just nauseous majority of the time, hardly ever used her iPad. So like I got to use her iPad way more. I was on Instagram way more, used her iPhone way more. Really grateful that my parents, ended up getting an iPhone for me too. Yeah, that iPhone was a gift from someone else. So that's why it was totally like, dang, what the heck? But yeah, and I think also, Julie got away with stuff a lot easier, and I'd call it out. I'd be like, oh no, you're not gonna just say like, I want it this way because I have cancer. Like, I'm not falling for that, like we kind of even play nowadays, like she's only allowed to use her cancer card once a year now to get what she wants. Just because like, it gets old, or that's not gonna work on me, because I'm her sister, and
Right.
I gotta be tough on her just because like she's tough on me too.
Right.
Yeah, and that whole tiptoeing stuff, oh man, it drew me crazy because I'm just, behind closed doors, you don't know what things she says to me too. Like, hey, she can be a little mean to me too sometimes, or it's not, and I feel like I would come across as bitter, because I'm just calling out like, well, Julie did this and she didn't get in trouble, and then I'm just the kid that's saying, oh, I'm not getting treated fairly, etc. So
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that when you were talking about, because I think social media really brought into focus the optics of things. So even, everybody's life on social media has to look a certain way, and there's just so much judgment. And again, like you say, it was something you couldn't go and feel the joy because you felt like it, it looked a different way than it should. It was not a good thing that would be perceived. And so, all of those kind of things hold you back. And so, yeah, it is interesting how much social media has impacted in a good way and in a bad way, people that are diagnosed with cancer and being able to stay connected. So Judy, what was your experience? So from the sibling perspective, so the relationship, I don't know if the relationship between Jackson and Hannah changed, and how did that all shift?
So everything changed. And like I think you said in the introduction, it's like life change. It's like it's kind of like when you bring a baby home for the first time, it's like your life changes, how you look at everything. It's the same thing. On the day Jackson got diagnosed, everything changed. And it's there's so many changes, but life keeps going on. And so with Hannah and Jackson, she grew up really fast, just like Alessandra said. Hannah had to grow up really fast, and it was really hard for her. She's in junior high, so junior high. So that age, the girls are as kind of like squirrely. And here Hannah is worrying if her brother's gonna ever come home from the hospital. And she would tell me time and time again, it's like all they talk about is, oh, this boy and that boy and their hair and their nails. And oh, my dog had cancer. And it drove her crazy to the point where she really isolated herself. And as a parent, I felt out of control. And as far as like what I could do for her, you know, I talked to the counselor at the school and I said, please keep an eye on her. And years later, I found out she would just bring her in the room and just talk about everything but that. And so I felt totally out of control as a mom to help Hannah. And what's really sad is, like Alessandra said, like people were always asking about Jackson, but not asking Hannah, how are you? Of course, her dad and I would, but she never heard it from other people. And Jackson got the iPad too. And he got a lot, and she felt like he wasn't appreciative because he was really cranky. He was really, really sick. And so it was, from a parent's perspective, my husband and I felt like we were doing the best we can, but there was always more we could do. And we didn't know what that was. What could we do to help Hannah? We couldn't just crawl into her mind and do her homework for her and do all the things that she was having to do while Jackson was in the hospital. It was tough. It was really, really tough. In hindsight, I wish we had put her in therapy during the time. We did afterwards, but I think it would have been nice to have somebody else that was focusing on nothing but her. And she's a very selfless person because of all this. It definitely changed her. She definitely thinks of other people before herself, but I feel like we could have helped her a little bit more. And there's always shoulda, woulda, coulda, like how we could have helped her. As far as the relationship between Jack and Hannah, Hannah calls Jack on anything, any BS or anything that he comes up with, she will call him on it. And she's super honest with him because she's really hard on him because she's never been one to want to baby him. And I think that's because of what she went through. She calls him out when he's playing the victim role. He doesn't do that much anymore, but back in the time. So yeah, she did the same. And she would tease about, the joke that we had was, you kind of get a morbid sense of humor because he lost 70 pounds in a month. He was super thin, had no hair, taking really heavy duty pain meds and not eating because he couldn't eat. And so we called him our anorexic drug addict dropout. That was the joke that Hannah would always call him that. And, you know, it's just to get a little sense of humor in it. But their relationship definitely changed and has still changed. Like it's still a little contentious at times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how you know, just sort of the ability to say those things. You know, one of the things that we deal with, you know, just as the organization, Be Present, is the what to say and what not to say. And I think there's certain license that you have as a sibling or as a close family member of what you can get away with and what you can say to each other, which if you look at the next, you know, ring of support out, there is definitely a different set of rules for what's okay to say and what's not okay to say, what's okay to joke about, and you know, when you shouldn't. And it's a really interesting dynamic. But like you know, back to the whole thing about normalcy is it's just about finding whatever it is that was real before, that just keeping it real in that way is really the best thing you can do. And if it means being mean to each other each, you know, once in a while, then that's what you got to do, because sibling rivalries are just like that. We all grow up and eventually like each other for the most part. I know some siblings don't, but anyway.
Well,
Okay.
and her attitude on life, just one last thing, and I don't know, with Alessandra and Juliana, I don't know if this is the case, but Hannah's a really hard worker. And when Jack got out of the hospital, he was just like, I just want to have fun. And that was just so against her way. And so she would just be like, no, but you have to be responsible. So she was trying to be a parent to him, and then he wouldn't accept her being a parent to him. And, you know, that kind of, that sibling.
Somebody's got to be in charge and be in control. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Ollie, we can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
No, we can't hear you.
Okay, well, I'll let
Oh, there
you
you
talk
go.
and
There
read
you
that.
go.
Can you hear me now? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. I was gonna say you are in the room next to me, so I could just go there. That's funny that you mentioned about Hannah kind of parenting Jackson, because not that I would parent Julie, because I mean we were both excited to go to college, but I bring up the FAFSA thing again because all the time Julie would just call me and be like, "What's my social security number?" And I'm like, "How do you not know your social security number, or like how do you not know how to like pay a bill?" So it was just like how did you get away not knowing this stuff? And it's like, oh wait, yeah, you were in a hospital fighting for your life. So I did have to end up teaching Julie, like, hey, this is what it means to be independent also. And you better catch up because I'm not gonna do it for you anymore. Like I think all through college, I'd end up reviewing Julie's essays. And I was like, okay, you've got a master's now. You don't need me to look at your essays anymore. So, like at the time, like, yeah, I'd help you out, but you gotta pick up the speed and do it yourself in a sense,
Mhm.
So, Julie, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Kind of what Judy said, how Jackson was like, I want to have fun. That's how I was. I graduated and I went to college in LA. So I was like, woohoo, gonna have fun. I'm ready. Because when I don't know if other people feel this way, but I think this still impacts me to this day. I always have like this small little voice in my head, like, what if I get cancer again? And I don't want to miss out on moments. So now, like when there's something I want to do, I do it. I don't wait to say like, oh, do grad school in a few years. Like when I wanted to go, I applied like that same year. So I think, I'm always on the go.
Yeah, Jackson just said to me yesterday, we celebrated a late birthday with him, and he said the same thing. He goes, I just need to live life to the fullest. He was on the brink a couple times, and he's like, that's just me. I'm always going to be like that.
Yeah, it makes you crazy if you worry too much about looking over your shoulder. You're never looking forward or enjoying the moment. So yeah, but I mean it's a balance, and I can definitely see how it can be consuming at times and get in your head and keep you preoccupied when it wants to. Okay, so we're going to shift to the last topic, which I think is the one that everybody has. It's probably some interesting and helpful advice here as well, and that is, what are some things, hindsight's 2020, although 2020 has a different definition after COVID, but looking back, we all have things that we could have done differently, maybe should have done differently, wished we'd done differently. And we can't change what we didn't, what happened in the past, but we can certainly help other people maybe make corrections or find ways to cope with things that they're currently struggling with. And so I just want to kind of give everybody a chance, and maybe we'll start with you first, Judy, on this last topic, which is just talking about tips or strategies that people can look at or do to bring balance back to the family and to bring stability back. I mean, all those things that just basically blow up when the cancer diagnosis is said. So go ahead.
Well, if there's long stays in the hospital, like for Jackson, he was spent a lot of time in the hospital. Every time he'd come home and go back. Hearing what Juliana said, I think I would have left the hospital more often and spent more time with Hannah. Like I said earlier, I probably would have gotten her into therapy during the thing, so she had an outlet that wasn't too close to the situation. But the hard thing was, like, all our energy was in dealing with everything that was going on with Jack. It's like, I don't know how I could have gotten her, because she wasn't driving, like how we could found, it's almost like that was too much. but in hindsight, anything is possible. Other tools, gosh, it's very humbling to have people help out and be there for you. Just saying yes to the people that want to help, I think, is a biggie. Talking to others that have been in your shoes, like someone like, parent liaison or whoever, someone who's been through it. Leaning on your faith community, just faith, and having that be, if that's something that's in your family. Some people run away from their faith, some people run closer to it. I found that writing was a huge tool for me personally, and learning to meditate was because there's a lot of downtime in the hospital. So I kind of taught myself a really elementary way to meditate, just to still the nerves and the chaos that was in my brain. As far as the Hannah and Jackson, I feel like, yeah, therapy is a really important thing, and it's the mental health is just as important as the physical health. I know I'm forgetting some other things that I had thought of before. If I think of them, I'll throw them back
you'll have
in.
a chance to come back around.
But well, and also as far as one thing with Jackson, I remember thinking, just focus on getting better. School, don't worry about school. He wasn't well enough to do school, so we basically kind of put that on the back burner. He ended up graduating with his senior class after all. So if that's a stressor, just take out all the stressors in your life and really simplify, home it in and simplify what's really important and what's not, and just do what's really important and let all the other stuff just, if possible, let it just kind of put that on the back burner.
Yeah, I'll just pile on with I felt like I had to be in the hospital 24/7. And at the end of the day, that, I was doing it, but I was not paying attention to maybe what Kirsten would have wanted me to do. And that, there were times when, I would leave if her friends were there. And there were times I went home and, gave her the night off so she could commiserate with her nurses and stuff. But I didn't do it often enough. I didn't pay attention to it soon enough. And I think that's, super important, just to kind of be mindful of that, because by doing that, you are creating the imbalance, right? By being in the hospital, you're not being with the other members of your family. And so that can be really hard. I was grateful that my son was in college, and so he was sort of self-sufficient at the time. But, there was different issues as far as communication and everything. But I think, yeah, that was a tough one. If there's one recommendation, because if things happen, that's the reality of life, right? Things are going to happen whether you're in the room or not. And so just be mindful of all the other important factors that are surrounding that person that you're in the room with, because not everybody wants to be with their parents 24/7 after they graduate from high school.
Well, and think about back in the day when parents couldn't stay in the hospital room with them. And Jackson was in really good hands. It might, as a mom, your heart is there.
It's the mother.
So it's in a way, it's a selfish thing just to stay there 24/7 after hearing what Juliana had to say. And so I definitely would have come home and spent more time with Hannah.
Yeah. And I was a social work intern at the hospital during my master's, and I wasn't in pediatrics, I was with adults. But, even if you don't feel comfortable going home, go to the cafeteria for a few hours. Or if you're, nervous about leaving, the patient alone, have a different family member, have a family friend, a new face, or, ask them, who would you like to spend the night? I can ask them if they can spend the night with you instead of me, because also you can't take care of the patient if you're not taking care of yourself. You can't be strong and a good advocate and take care of others if you don't take care of yourself. So sometimes sleeping in your own bed, one night, can rejuvenate you so much. And we really need to think about taking time for ourselves, because when we're kind of like always on the go, and if you're just taking care of that patient, you're neglecting yourself, and neglecting your other relationships as well.
We always, this, on that note, we always tell the parents, it's like in the airplane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on your child. So we have to, that self-care is so important. For
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
Alessandra, how about you? What are some things that you would recommend?
Therapy for sure. Even just like, I mean, I had a therapist for myself, and that was fantastic. But one of the things my therapist taught, and I was a teenage girl also. Are we the best communicators? No, by any means. Are we great communicators? Alone, teenagers just don't know how to communicate, period. So, and then add this cancer, now we really don't know how to communicate. So I think one thing that my family would have benefited from is doing group therapy, kind of like having a third party there to teach us how to validate each other's feelings and teach us how to have a fruitful conversation. Um, I think that would have been excellent. Um, Another thing, my mom got all the teachers at my school for Julie, with the principal, and I never had a meeting with my teachers. Um, and there were lots of times where I was in school struggling, but I never talked to my teachers about why I bombed their test, or why I was not prepared for a quiz. And I didn't tell my coaches why I had a bad game day. So I wish I would have advocated for myself and say like, hey, I can't do my homework. And I was taking like 4 AP classes my senior year and an honors class, so I really was immersed in work all the time. It was just so hard to concentrate on school with that happening. So I wish I would have told my teachers I need a break, because while Julie was sick, it was just focus on your health right now. Don't worry about school. I didn't get told that. And I think I should have been told that, like, it's okay if you don't turn in this assignment on time. You don't have to stay up till 3 a.m. doing your homework, because it's really hard for you to finish the sentence, because I know your mind's thinking about your sister in the hospital. So I think, like we mentioned earlier, the sibling really tries to be strong. I think another thing was just asking for help too. Chores were like the last thing I wanted to do when I get home was to clean the bathroom. Like I didn't, like parents that's listening right now, or families, if your home is messy, that is totally fine. Your house does not need to be ready for guests 24/7 while you're dealing with a cancer diagnosis. I think another thing was um, just asking. I think we're talking a lot about self-care, and that's important. And I wish I would have hung out with my friends, and even, hung out with my friends without Julie too, because I had friends and I had activities I wanted to do, and, to not feel guilty for having a life, I guess. Um, Even now, things that I struggle with is, I think Judy, you said how Hannah is very selfless. I think I've just been adopted into this role of putting myself second, or helping, 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 that I don't stop to be like, I'm doing so much for all these people. I need to stop and just do me. And that's something I still struggle with. And I'm still learning how to be like, oh, I'm not going to take on this much work, or I'm not going to take on this much responsibility, and not feeling guilty about it. And yeah, just, you know, I'm really glad to be in a period where we're talking about mental health, we're talking about self-care, and everybody deserves that. Every person in the family deserves that, and kind of needs to learn, or take time to do that on their own or with others or with a professional, etc. So the experience of learning doesn't have to be by yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Alessandra. I have to just add to that for sure, because I mean, that whole selfless thing, I don't know why that happens to the sibling. Like all of a sudden I have to take care of everybody. And I can't tell you how many times I'm like, Hannah, but take care of you, like have fun. I have to remind her to have fun. And that's also, if anybody's out here listening with the siblings, I wish so much I had sat down with, I think I did, but it didn't, sat down with the principal and talked to all the teachers together. Because there were some teachers like, I don't care what you're going through. And Jackson would end at 11:30 at night, we'd be rushing to the hospital with him throwing up and we didn't know what was going on. And she'd be left there having to get up at 6:30 in the morning, go to school the next morning when we're like, what's going on with him? He's back in the hospital again. That happened like 3 or 4 times. And I would communicate with the teachers, but I really don't think I sat down with the teachers. And I feel like it's really important. The siblings, teachers need to know that there's sometimes when they cannot step up to the plate and it's okay. And
Yeah, that's a really good point.
huge,
Yeah,
huge.
and I think a lot of times teachers just don't even know. I mean, I think a lot of them just don't know what to expect, what's going
don't know.
on, the true impact it has. One of the things that we're talking about doing as part of Be Present is actually having that education, not only of the school, you know, the children that are in school, but also the teachers, because again, a lot of times they do things and say things that are, you know, insensitive and just show a lack of understanding. And it's not necessarily being malicious, but just not understanding. And then I think the other thing, like you guys said, you know, communicate. My tagline is, if you don't ask for what you need, you'll get what they think you need. And that's usually never matches, although some people are in sync with your needs, but not very many. And so, you know, really being able to verbalize and feel okay with the fact that, you know, you are entitled, both as the patient and the sibling that's supporting, to say what you need and how you feel. But it's, you know, easier said than done too, of course. But I think communication, like we've been saying throughout, is just super important. And whether it's your family or your friends or your teachers or your workmates, if you're at, you know, work and they're all kind of wondering what's going on and stuff, there's all these different situations where just a little clarity, I think, goes a long way for everybody.
Wanted to add some more about communication. That's something that I definitely would have done differently. I think that if I could have took the lead on communicating my feelings, and I'm glad that we brought up therapy, because sometimes we don't know how to communicate with our family our feelings, or sometimes we communicate our feelings to our family and they just aren't receptive to them. So sometimes talking to somebody outside of your family can be very beneficial. So we talked about like the siblings and the patient, but I think also the parents should go to therapy. I think that will be very helpful. Or a recommendation also that was very helpful to myself, and I'm sure that my sister also, there was like a support group at Rady's called Somfab that stood for Some of My Best Friends Are Bald. And being around people who have similar experiences, you know, can bring a lot of comfort. They're able to tell you, like, I was going to have a blood transfusion. My family was like freaking out. And then we met somebody else and they're like, oh, that's normal. No, it's fine. Blood transfusion. Everybody gets it. So talking to others, reaching out to support through a therapist or through support groups are very helpful. Also, Judy, similar to you, my family, obviously when someone gets diagnosed, somebody sits down and you're like, okay, let's make a plan of how we're going to handle this. Everything just goes off. And, you know, my mom kind of stayed with me and my dad stayed with my sister. And I wish that we would have taken time to all be together. The only time that we were all together was when my dad brought my sister to come visit me at the hospital right after school for a little bit. And that caused tension because I was with my mom all of the time. And then I was not with my dad enough. So I wish that we would have tried to take time to be all together. And I also wish that I would have validated my siblings' feelings during the experience. I'm sure, Jackson, probably looking back of his fights with Hannah, or if he was cranky, would say the same, but we're not feeling well, we're cranky, and we're the ones who are going through treatment. Like, what do you have to complain about? But I'm sure things would have went more smoothly if I took the time to listen to how my other family members were feeling during that experience.
Yeah, that's great advice. And definitely something hopefully people will, take forward. I think the routine and doing things with family members is a big one too, because again, that's another mechanism for bringing balance back into the family. Even if you pick one day a week or one small amount of a day every week or whatever the regular time frame is, but to have a chance to just connect again as a family, and I think it goes a long way. Well, I hate to say it, but I'm looking at my clock here, and we're running up against time, which breaks my heart because I feel like we could go on for another hour. If there's any questions, shoot them in the chat, and we'll be able to follow up afterwards. But again, really appreciative of everybody tonight for listening in and watching, and for those that are going to watch the recorded session afterwards, thank you for watching. But also thank you so much, Juliana, Alessandra, and Judy. Just really appreciate your conversation and your insights tonight. It was really a pleasure to talk to you, and I really feel like, it taught me a bunch of things, and I think it's going to be helpful for others. And so thank you so much for your time. And just wrapping up, so this session will be recorded, and we will send out a link following the session for anybody that's interested. But again, thank you so much for your time. Everybody have a great night.